When I died, Shen Sui was not in the capital. Before he left, he had a big fight with me and threw a divorce letter into my arms. As soon as he left, chaos broke out in the capital. I tried my best to help my mother-in-law and her family escape. However, they turned their backs on me and cruelly abandoned me, leaving me to be humiliated and killed by the rebels. Before I died, I thought, what a pity I didn't have the chance to tell him that I was pregnant.
1.
When I followed Shen Sui back to the capital from Lin County, the rebellion in the capital had already been put down. My mother-in-law and her family are all safe and sound. The mansion seemed to have been thoroughly cleaned, without any trace of the rebels left, including my body. 3 days ago, I died in a rebel riot while trying to save my mother-in-law's family. At that time, the rebels had already rushed into the mansion, and I tried my best to get my mother-in-law and her entourage onto the carriage. I had already stepped one foot on it, but my mother-in-law suddenly went crazy and pushed me to the ground. The carriage went farther and farther away, but I was dragged into the mansion by the rebels and tortured and killed. Before she died, they said, "Why is there so much blood down there? Is she pregnant?" I slowly closed my eyes and thought, Shen Sui doesn't even know about this baby, who is less than a month old. I wanted to tell him the good news that day, but before I could open my mouth, we had a big argument. He threw a divorce letter into my arms and walked away. I want to save it, so I don't want to leave. So when we encountered the riot, I still wanted to help Shen Sui protect his family. But I never thought that this would harm both myself and my child. When I opened my eyes again after death, I became a ghost and followed Shen Sui. Black and white impermanence said that I was too deeply bound to the mortal world and could not enter the cycle of reincarnation. Only when the obsession disappears can you be reborn. I don't understand. I have no father or mother and no worries. What obsession could I have? As soon as the mother-in-law saw Shen Sui, she threw herself into his arms and burst into tears. "My son, you are finally back. What happened? We 3 have suffered so much." His younger brother and sister also rushed over to hug him, crying breathlessly. Watching their family reunion, I felt like my chest was leaking air. Shen Sui pushed them aside and looked around. "Where is Wan Yang?" The mother-in-law's face changed slightly. She became nervous and opened her mouth, not knowing how to answer. It was the butler Li who was standing next to him who replied, "On the day of the rebellion, the madam abandoned the old lady and ran off with someone else." The mother-in-law was heartbroken and said, "It's all my fault. I was useless and couldn't keep an eye on your wife. I let her run away with the adulterer named Pei." Shen Sui frowned. "I divorced my stepmother before I left. She has no adulterer. Mother, please don't talk nonsense and ruin her reputation." The mother-in-law was shocked when she heard this. "It's a good idea to divorce her. How can a performer like her be worthy of my son's position as the junior official of the Dali Temple? You're not worthy of me, so you want to kill me to make room for the daughter of the Shangshu family?"
2.
Shen Sui's face darkened, and the mother-in-law shut up awkwardly. She was most afraid of Shen Sui getting angry. She had been sent back to his hometown by Shen Sui once before, and it had been a very ugly scene. It's just that she was thick-skinned and used the gratitude for raising him as an excuse, so Shen Sui Guy had to tolerate her. It's because she was not Shen Sui's biological mother, but his stepmother. Shen Sui's mother passed away early, and his father remarried his mother-in-law, a widow with a son, and had another daughter. A few years later, his father also died of illness. The mother-in-law never remarried. She raised Shen Sui with her children, paid for his education, and sent him to his current position. Therefore, whenever the mother-in-law cried out for favors, Shen Sui was powerless to fight back. I know he actually doesn't like his mother-in-law. As usual, Shen Sui was about to cross the garden to the study, but the entrance to the garden was blocked by wooden bars. Butler Li came up to explain. The rebels came in and looted, and the garden was badly damaged. "It's being repaired. Why don't you take a detour, young master?" Shen Sui glanced inside, then turned and took another route. In the study, Shen Sui stared at the official documents and became lost in thought. "Shen Sui, the room is too dark. Stop reading." I leaned over the table and waved at him, but he ignored me. I'm not used to being a ghost yet, and I can't help wanting to talk to him. It was really boring that I didn't get any response from him after I finished speaking. I floated next to him again. Shen Sui, I burned the divorce letter you gave me that day. Shen Sui didn't know what he was thinking about, and suddenly he sneered. He murmured to himself, "It's better to leave." Are you talking about me? I'm not leaving. Your mother lied to you. I sighed. Could it be that he didn't know that I was dead for his entire life and still thought that Pei Lang and I were together? Pei Lang is a friend of mine who grew up with me in a drama troupe, and we are like brothers. Shen Sui, however, didn't like him and always said that he had bad intentions towards me, and his words were full of jealousy. We quarreled many times, and besides my mother-in-law's interference, a big part of the reason was Pei Lang. It was probably because of Pei Lang's words on the wedding day, "If you are not doing well, just come to me. I will marry you." I laughed out loud at the thought. Shen Sui really holds a grudge. He always brings up jokes from many years ago to make fun of me. Whenever I couldn't win an argument, I would say, "Go find your brother Pei. He loves you more than I do anyway." When I denied it, he got angry and threw me on the bed, punishing me severely until he was satisfied. Except for the last quarrel. After he finished speaking, he took out the divorce papers and threw them to me. "Go with him and don't come back." How cold-blooded. He says he doesn't love you anymore. At this time, Shen Sui's personal servant Wang Quan came over and said, "The old lady has invited Miss Yang, the daughter of the Shangshu mansion, to visit the mansion tomorrow. I hope you can take some time to meet her." Shen Sui was silent for a moment, then responded, "Okay." 3. The reason why he was so anxious to drive me away was all because of Miss Yang. It turns out that all the denials you made in front of me before were fake. In fact, he, like his mother, has not wanted me for a long time. He must regret marrying me. A handsome and talented man should be paired with a pretty and gentle young lady. The next day, from a distance, one could see the mother-in-law and sister-in-law serving Yang Ryue as she entered the Shen family mansion. She made such a big fuss, fearing that others wouldn't know she was coming. She was used to being high-profile. She once spread the word throughout the capital that she would not marry anyone other than Shen Sui. They also spread rumors that Shen Sui's wife was actually a secret prostitute kept by the opera troupe. Shen Sui exchanged his wife for the position of Shaoqing of Dali Temple. Colleagues all advised Shen Sui to divorce his wife and remarry, or to demote his wife to a concubine. It's not worth giving up the Shangshu's daughter for an actor or a prostitute. Shen Sui turned a deaf ear to these rumors. He never argued with his colleagues. But when he got off duty, he took those guys to the end of the alley and gave them a good beating. Another memorial was submitted to the emperor, which made the Shangshu extremely unhappy. The emperor pretended to reprimand her, and then let the matter go. However, Shen Sui's official career became even more difficult. Everyone laughed at him for having a prostitute wife. To this day, he is still the subject of much laughter in the capital. He probably couldn't hold on any longer and was determined not to want me. I heard that Lord Shen divorced Sangwan. Is it true? Yang Ryue was really well informed. The mother-in-law nodded vigorously. It couldn't be more true. My son said it himself. It seems that he has thought it through. He finally understands the goodness of Miss Yang. Yang Ryue smiled shyly and was very happy. The mother-in-law continued to coax her. Miss Yang is gentle and virtuous. Her talent and appearance are unmatched. It is a blessing for my son to be favored by her. Unlike stepmother, she looks flirtatious and lewd. If he hadn't slept with my son, how could he have ignored his reputation and married an actress? She even had a miscarriage before getting married. I'm afraid it's the child of her adulterer. My son was deceived by her. What my mother-in-law said is both right and wrong. At that time, I was the leading actress in the troupe, and Shen Sui always loved to come and watch my plays. After a few visits, I fell in love with him. But I know he wouldn't like a woman like me. A troupe of Chinese opera was invited to a birthday party for a wealthy businessman in Beijing and performed for 3 consecutive days. At night, he stayed at the home of a wealthy businessman. That night, I walked into the wrong room and met Shen Sui, who was teaching in a wealthy businessman's home at the time. His face flushed, and he looked a little flustered when he saw me. I could tell at a glance that he had taken Meng Lang's medicine. Maybe one of the ladies in the mansion took a fancy to him and wanted to have a chance encounter with him. He just didn't seem willing. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need me to call a doctor?" He shook his head with difficulty, looking very uncomfortable. "I think I can't bear it anymore. Can you help me, girl?" I was surprised. I didn't expect that Shen Sui, who seemed like an immortal, would make such a request. Seeing that I was frightened, he quickly said, "Shen will marry the girl." He took a jade pendant from his neck and gave it to me. "This is the betrothal gift my mother left for her daughter-in-law before she passed away. This is a token of love. Keep it well." I held the warm jade pendant in my hand, and my heart was moved. In fact, I don't want to get married, and I can't even imagine marrying Shen Sui. But I like him and would like to spend a night with him, even if he is lying to me. 4. To reassure him, I put on the jade pendant and smiled sweetly at him. "Okay." He also smiled, his eyes shining, and he seemed very happy. He kissed me eagerly and tore off my clothes roughly, not at all as steady and composed as usual. Afterwards, while he was still asleep, I left the jade pendant and sneaked away. After that, I followed the troop to Yangzhou. Unfortunately, I was pregnant. The child must not be kept. I took an abortion pill and was in excruciating pain when Shen Sui came looking for me. He was very haggard, trembling as he held me, who was covered in blood, in his arms and said hoarsely, "Don't be afraid, Wan Yang. I'm here." The abortion drug was too strong. The baby was aborted, and I lost half my life. The foundation has been damaged, and the doctor said I may never get pregnant again. Shen Sui felt very guilty and asked me with red eyes, "Why did you leave without saying goodbye? Don't you believe me?" I was silent. "Marry me, please?" "I'm serious." "But I can't have children anymore." "I don't care. I just want you, stepmother." He looked so sincere, as if he loved me to the core. He put the jade pendant back around my neck and said, "In this life, Shen Sui only loves Sangwon and will always be with you through thick and thin." But what is there nowadays about sticking together through thick and thin and never leaving each other? He divorced me because his mother killed me. After watching so many plays about unfaithful talented men and beautiful ladies, I actually believe in men's oaths. Shen Sui stood behind the screen for a long time. After listening to his mother's slander against me, he showed no expression and his eyes were cold. Yang Ryue couldn't bear to hear her mother-in-law's vulgar words, so she changed the subject. "Is Mr. Shen at home? I have something to say to him." Yes. I'll go call him." As soon as he finished speaking, Shen Sui walked out from behind the screen. "Meet Miss Yang." The mother-in-law almost laughed her mouth off. "You guys chat. I'm leaving now." There were only 2 of them left in the hall. Logically speaking, single men and single women should not stay together. But Shen Sui didn't care, and Yang Ryue was even more happy with it. Yang Ryue took out a box from her sleeve and opened it, revealing a transparent, emerald green jade pendant. She said shyly, "Shen Lang, you really have me in your heart. What you said that day about divorcing your wife and marrying me turned out to be true. I never lie. My father has agreed to our marriage. This jade pendant is a token of my love for you. You must keep it well." Shen Sui stared at the jade pendant in a trance. After a while, he came back to his senses and smiled. "Okay." He looked at Yang Ryue and smiled charmingly, just like he did to me back then. Yang Ryue blushed, not daring to look him in the face, and asked in a low voice, "When will you come to marry me?" Shen Sui played with the jade pendant, his eyes deep and unfathomable. "Wait a little longer, it will be soon." Yang Ryue said coquettishly, "But I have waited long enough. I don't want to wait any longer." Shen Sui's face turned cold, and he threw the jade pendant into the box. "If you can't wait, marry someone else." Yang Ryue panicked. I can wait. Shen Sui pinched her chin with satisfaction and smiled a bit evilly. "Now you are obedient." I turned my head away, never wanting to see this pair of scumbag and bitch flirting again. 5. After Yang Ryue left, Shen Sui called Wang Quan and said, "Throw this box away, throw it far away, don't let me see it." Yes. Did he feel that accepting Yang Ryue was a great humiliation? I think it's ridiculous. Since you have made up your mind to abandon me and take on this huge wealth, why should you be so twisted? Wang Quan suddenly remembered something and reported, "Sir, I just found Madam's jade pendant in the bushes beside the corridor of the ancestral hall." This token of love already had cracks on it, and the blood had dried up and was spotted with dark red, eye-catching colors. Shen Sui's expression changed. He pushed Wang Quan away and walked quickly towards the ancestral hall. "That's where I was humiliated and died. There should be a large pool of blood there." Shen Sui's job at the Dali Temple was to solve cases, and he could tell at a glance that the floor here had been cleaned. Even the weeds in the corners were trimmed. Shen Sui suddenly looked uneasy. "Wang Quan, go check where Pei Lang is now. Quickly." "Yes." Shen Sui ran back to my yard and looked around in my room. Unexpectedly, all my belongings were cleaned up. Shen Sui murmured, "No, my stepmother won't take everything away." Wang Quan came back soon. "Sir, the doorman came to report that Master Pei wants to see you." When he saw Pei Lang, Shen Sui remained calm and asked, "Mr. Pei, what's the matter?" Pei Lang had become accustomed to Shen Sui's cold attitude and didn't care. "I will leave the capital and return to my hometown tomorrow. I hope Lord Shen can tell my mother after I leave." Upon hearing this, Shen Sui's breathing suddenly became unstable. "Tell her? She never contacted you." Pei Lang shook his head and laughed. "She is always afraid that you will be unhappy, so why would she come to see me alone? I haven't seen her for a long time, Lord Shen, don't worry." Shen Sui looked at Pei Lang's departing back and suddenly staggered. Wang Quan quickly supported him and said, "Sir, do you want to ask the old lady to come and ask clearly?" Shen Sui closed his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't make it public. Send someone to look for him first." After a pause, he said, "Ask Stewardly to come see me." It seems he guessed something. I felt a little happy. I don't ask him to help me get revenge. I just hope he can find out the truth and find my body. Shen Sui assembled a team of people and quietly sneaked into my courtyard to look for me. As soon as Butler Li came in, he was captured, tied up and thrown in front of Shen Sui. "What do you mean, young master?" Butler Li was still pretending to be calm. Shen Sui's cold eyes exuded a dangerous aura. He raised his fingers slightly. Wang Quan gave the order. 50 slaps on the face. Before Butler Li could react, he was knocked down, and his face was swollen. Shen Sui then spoke. "Tell me, where is the madam?" Butler Li was still stubborn. "She eloped with her adulterer Pei Lang." Shen Sui let out a dull sneer from his throat, which made people feel creepy. He slowly drew out Wang Quan's sword. In the blink of an eye, a knife was swung down, and Butler Li's arm fell to the ground, with blood spurting everywhere. Butler Li finally came to his senses and screamed in fear. As soon as he shouted, his mouth was blocked. "Do you remember the consequences of slandering her?" Shen Sui's voice was extremely calm, but it gave me chills. This is the Shen Sui I have never seen before. He is always gentle and considerate to me, but I didn't expect that he would be like a living devil when handling cases. Butler Li was shaking like a sieve and even became incontinent. At this time, a woman tied up with hands and feet was thrown over. Found it in the woodshed. The woman raised her head, knelt in front of Shen Sui and cried, "Sir, please save my wife." 6. This is my maid Xiaodao. We got separated on the day of the riot, and I couldn't take care of her after I was captured by the rebels. "Where is she?" That day I saw the lady send the old lady and the others to the carriage. The lady could have gone with them, but the old lady pushed the lady off the carriage. Xiao Tao suddenly stopped and looked at Shen Sui's sinister and cold eyes and dared not say anything. Shen Sui was afraid of scaring her, so he asked softly, "And then?" Xiao Tao cried and said, "My wife was captured by the rebels and dragged back to the mansion. There were so many of them. They tied the lady to a pillar and humiliated her, one after another. Shut up, Shen Sui suddenly interrupted. I can't listen to it anymore. I don't want to recall such a painful experience again. What about her? I don't know. I was so scared that I hid somewhere. Shen Sui suddenly grabbed her neck and asked coldly, why didn't you save her?
Huh.
I bought you back so that you can take good care of her. His chest heaved violently, and his eyes were full of hostility. Seeing that Xiao Tao was about to be strangled to death, he suddenly let go of her hand. Drag him away and lock him up. Shen Sui wiped his hands with a handkerchief. He picked up the knife, walked in front of Butler Li, slowly lowered his head, his eyes as cold as ice. It's your turn again. Butler Li almost fainted and said weakly, didn't Xiao Tao say that? She's dead. Madam is dead. She was already dead when we came back. Her clothes were torn, and there was blood all over the floor. She was so pitiful. Shen Sui's eyes suddenly turned red. He should have guessed it when he saw the bloody jade pendant. It's still hard to accept the truth from someone else at this moment, right? A husband and wife are bound by 100 days of grace. I guess he must have some feelings for me. Butler Li suddenly laughed crazily. But I won't tell you where the wife's body is. If I tell you, my life will be gone. You're right, you're a little clever, much smarter than my mother. No, 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 from the moment she pushed my stepmother down, she is no longer my mother. It doesn't matter if you don't tell me. I will spare your life for now, and let you watch how your woman and your daughter suffer because of you. Butler Li widened his eyes in disbelief. You know that? Shen Sui sneered. Know what? Know that you committed adultery with my stepmother when my father was still alive and gave birth to a beautiful sister for me. Butler Li collapsed to the ground. I was kind-hearted. I didn't pursue the matter because my stepmother had served my father wholeheartedly and worked hard to support my studies. How dare you conspire to kill my wife? I want you all to go to hell and pay for her lives.
7.
Butler Li was locked up. Shen Sui dismissed everyone and sat alone at the door of my room, touching the jade pendant and crying. I floated to his side and comforted him. Shen Sui, it's nothing, just a dead wife. You were going to divorce me anyway, so this is good. It saves a lot of trouble, but the reputation of being a widower is not good. Before he could finish his words, he could hear a dull sob. His whole body curled up and trembled, and a hoarse cry came out of his throat. I opened my mouth, but my throat seemed to be blocked and I couldn't utter any more words. It turns out that being a ghost can also experience this heart-wrenching feeling. I didn't understand. Aren't you going to divorce me? Why are you still so sad? He murmured with endless regret. If I had let Pei Lang take you away earlier, wouldn't it be possible? So, he wanted to divorce me just to protect me? My eyes were sore. What's the use? I don't want to leave you at all. Shen Sui sat at the door all night. He called Wang Quan, and as soon as the sky was light, he sent his mother-in-law and her family to Wan'an Temple. The mother-in-law yawned and complained in the carriage. Why are we bothering you so early in the morning? Mother and my brothers and sisters are here to chant sutras for the souls of those who died in the rebellion. Shen Sui closed his eyes and rested, without even looking at her. What the hell does this have to do with me? It's not my fault. Shen Sui suddenly opened his eyes, with murderous intent in his eyes that his mother-in-law could not see. If it weren't for them, how would you know that it wasn't you who died? The mother-in-law shrank back in fear when she thought of the brutality of the rebels. Shen Sui said a few words to the monks in the temple, but his voice was too low for me to hear clearly. I'll pick you up in 7 days. The mother-in-law was shocked. So long. This is also what the minister meant. The mother-in-law gave up the idea of resisting and asked, Where is Steward Li? Shen Sui said meaningfully, Let him prepare for his marriage with Yang Ruyue. The mother-in-law was shocked and nodded repeatedly with satisfaction. Okay. I will be the Shangshu's relative in the future. I wonder who in the capital dares to look down on me. She has suffered for most of her life and dreams of becoming a superior person. Shen Sui has already climbed to the position of Shaoqing of Dali Temple. With time, he will surely be promoted step by step, but she still feels it is not enough. Greed is insatiable. Shen Sui must have prepared a big show for her. I felt so distressed when I saw Shen Sui's tired appearance. He wants to avenge me.
8.
Now the court is all about suppressing Prince Yu's rebellion. The court officials were outraged, but the emperor remained unmoved. It was only because Prince Yu was his favorite son that he felt compassion. Shen Sui watched coldly, and only when the emperor called for the court to be adjourned did he slowly step out. I have a memorial to submit that shows that Prince Yu has colluded with the Jie tribe on the border. It is evidence that Prince Yu has been colluding with the Jie tribe for many years. Your Majesty, please investigate. The saint looked very unhappy. If I speak out now, no matter what the outcome will be for Prince Yu, the emperor will definitely hate me. After the court session ended, he went to the Supreme Court and was dragged to a corner by the Minister of Justice. Didn't we agree that this evidence should be handed over to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince first? Are you going to offend His Majesty now? Are you going to kill yourself? Shen Sui didn't care. I don't want to wait. Anyway, I have only one life. I have nothing to fear. You don't want a career in government anymore? Don't want. The Dali Temple official left in anger. Shen Sui smiled bitterly and mocked himself. Without one yang, what use are those worldly possessions to me? That night, the emperor was furious. He ordered that Prince Yu be demoted to a commoner and immediately executed by slow slicing. Also executed were the rebels under Prince Yu's command. Everyone in Prince Yu's palace, regardless of gender, age, or status, was beheaded. Originally, the emperor only wanted to revoke his title and ordered him never to return to the capital. However, the piece of evidence provided by Shen Sui pushed him into the abyss of tragic death, and his family was also implicated. That night, there were constant miserable wails in Prince Yu's mansion. I even heard Prince Yu cursing Shen Sui for a bad death. Shen Sui stood in the dark, looking at Prince Yu's palace with gloomy eyes. It's not satisfying enough. I still have to do it myself. Mother, who do you think will be the next one? Such a terrifying Shen Sui is so strange. He should be as gentle as jade and as warm as spring breeze. I wanted to hug him, but as soon as I touched him, I passed through him like a phantom. Husband, I don't want revenge. I'm afraid of you doing this. Unfortunately, Shen Sui couldn't hear anything. He had completely sunk into the abyss of hatred.
9.
Along with Prince Yu, the Shangshu was also questioned because he also participated in the rebellion. It turned out that Shen Sui had already started the investigation. He never thought of marrying Yang Ryue, and he was determined to bring down the Shangshu at all costs. The male members of a Shangshu mansion were imprisoned and awaited execution. The female members of the family were sent to the Jiafangxi and became official prostitutes. Yang Ryue, who once slandered me as a prostitute, turned out to be a real prostitute herself. How ironic. Shen Sui used his connections to arrange for Yang Ryue to receive customers on the first day.
There are still several at a time.
After being devastated for a few days, when she saw Yang Ryue again, she had lost her former pride. Her disheveled hair, scarred face, and torn clothes all showed what she had been through. Seeing Shen Sui, she huddled on the dirty and messy bed, crying and shaking her head. Shen Lang, what should I do? I'm so dirty. I'm no longer worthy of you. Shen Sui looked at her coldly. You are not worthy of her. You are not even as good as a hair of my stepmother. What? Shen Sui laughed at himself. You still have a bed to sleep in, but where is my stepmother? She is all alone and helpless. I don't even know where she is. Yang Ryue didn't know who Shen Sui was. What does it mean? She can only take care of herself. She knelt on the ground and begged Shen Sui for help. Shen Lang, please help me. I don't want to be a prostitute here. How can I let those people defile my body? A daughter of a rich family. Please save me. Shen Sui thought for a moment, as if he had thought of something. In that case, can I redeem you? His voice was full of seduction. I knew he must be thinking of something worse than becoming a prostitute to torture her. Yang Ryue still doesn't understand how terrifying this man is. She hugged his legs tightly as if she had grabbed a life-saving straw. Okay. Shen Sui kicked her away in disgust and said, "Clean up. Someone will come to take you back to the mansion to be my concubine tomorrow." Yang Ryue was filled with gratitude and said, "I am willing to be your concubine. As long as I can be with Shen Lang, I am willing to work like a cow or a horse." Shen Sui went to Xiaoyu again. He dismissed the guards and faced the Shangshu and his son alone. "Shen Sui, you are so vicious. My Yang family has never offended you. Why are you so vicious?" They stared at Shen Sui, wishing they could rush up and kill him immediately. Unfortunately, he was tied up with iron chains and couldn't move. "Really?" Shen Sui sneered. "You allowed Yang Ryue to take advantage of her status as a noble lady to steal other people's husbands and throw dirty water on others. You even suppressed and pressured me in the officialdom to force me to submit. You call this not offending me? Should I also thank Lord Yang for looking up to me? Do you know how hard my wife's life was? Everyone in the capital could bully her, but she never blamed me at all." Shen Sui covered his chest in pain, unable to breathe. He changed the subject. "Master Yang, you know that your daughter has become a whore that can be ridden by anyone." The father and son yelled, "You lunatic! How can you take it out on a woman?" Shen Sui sneered and went to untie the chains. "As for you, you have a chance to regain your freedom. Do you want it?" The father and son, who were cursing each other just now, looked at each other. Although I didn't believe it, I couldn't help but ask, "What chance?" Shen Sui took out a dagger and said, "There is only one knife, and only one person can survive. What can you do?" Just as the Shangshu was thinking, his son snatched the dagger and stabbed it straight into his chest. The Shangshu fell to the ground in shock, holding his chest and trembling, pointing at his good son. "You beast." The Shangshu died with his eyes open, and before his son could even feel proud, he was killed in the neck by Shen Sui. Blood sprayed all over Shen Sui, but he didn't care at all, and even rubbed the blood on his hands with satisfaction. "Mother, what did I say? I have to do it myself to feel good." After the man was completely dead, he called out, "Help!" The prisoner committed suicide.
10.
That night, the mother-in-law finally finished chanting and returned to the Shen mansion. She was not informed and had no idea what had happened in the past few days. Shen Sui waited for her with a cold expression, waiting for her to come back and die. As soon as the mother-in-law entered the house, she began to complain. "My son, if it weren't for you, why would I have to work so hard? I get up before dawn every day to copy sutras and chant Buddhist scriptures, kneeling all day long. I wasn't even given enough food. I was always beaten and scolded. If you didn't know, you would think I was in jail. Look at my knees, they are swollen." Shen Sui didn't even raise his eyes. Just as she was about to sit down, Shen Sui said coldly, "Kneel down." "What?" The mother-in-law thought she had heard it wrong. Before she could react, Wang Quan kicked her in the knee and she fell to the ground. A dog ate shit and her mouth was full of dust. Her mouth was broken, and she looked so miserable. I suppressed a laugh. The mother-in-law couldn't believe it. "Are you crazy? What is going on?" Shen Sui then looked at her, his eyes gleaming with coldness. "Kneel down." The mother-in-law was shocked by Shen Sui's gaze. She stood there in fear, unable to believe it. "Where did you hide my wife's body?" The mother-in-law was surprised. She never expected that Shen Sui would know the truth so quickly. His face was already filled with fear, but he still said stubbornly, "What did you say?" "Your stepmother is dead." Shen Sui frowned, his patience was exhausted, and he went up and slapped his mother-in-law twice. As if he was still not satisfied, he grabbed her hair and slammed her against the pillar. My mother-in-law felt dizzy and blood was all over her head. She groaned in pain and cried, "How dare you hit me? I'm your mother. What's wrong with your conscience? I raised you to this age, and you want to kill me?" Shen Sui wiped the blood off his hands and said, "Bring her lover here." The moment the mother-in-law saw that Butler Lee had lost his arm, she realized that Shen Sui knew everything. He even knew all the secrets she had kept hidden for more than 10 years. Shen Sui is serious this time. It's not about scaring her or intimidating her. She can no longer be controlled by kindness like in the past. He really has no regard for her. He is a madman who will take her life. She screamed and tried to tear Shen Sui apart. You beast! Give him back his hand. Shen Sui kicked her in the heart, and she spat out a large mouthful of blood before she calmed down. Butler Lee, there is only one chance to survive. If you don't want it, I will give it to her. Butler Lee was trembling with fear. Seeing that Shen Sui was so cruel to his stepmother who raised him, how could he dare to do anything else? I want it, I want it. Staying alive is the most important thing. There was a hint of sarcasm on Shen Sui's lips. Where is my wife? It's in the mansion, buried in the back garden. I can take you to find it. I thought my body would be thrown into a mass grave, but I didn't expect it to be still in the mansion. Shen Sui closed his fingertips, his face turned slightly pale, and he smiled bitterly and said to himself, I should have thought of it earlier. 11. He left everyone behind and stumbled to the garden. It was obvious where I was buried. The soil there was obviously different from elsewhere. He dug with his bare hands like a madman, and soon his hands were covered in blood, staining the soil red. Wan Yang, I will take you home, he repeated hoarsely, crying with regret and despair. My eyes were sore, and my heart was filled with sorrow. Wang Quan brought a lot of people over and finally dug out my body. For some reason, the body had not rotted even after 10 days of death. It looked like he was asleep. I was even shocked, but the body was in a terrible state, without a single piece of clothing on. Shen Sui quickly took off his clothes and covered my naked body. With trembling hands, he gently brushed away the hair from my face, revealing my bloodless, scarred face. Wan Yang.
He called me softly.
I was on the ground, without any reaction. He gently held me in his arms and whispered in my ear, Nanny, I'm back. As soon as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood and finally fainted on my corpse. He had a fever for 2 days before he woke up. When he woke up, he asked Wang Quan, Where is Wan Yang? Wang Quan said, It has been buried and is placed in the hall. Shen Sui was furious. Who allowed you to do this? He fell off the bed, without even putting on his shoes, and hurried to the coffin and carried me back to bed. It's cold, and I don't like sleeping in a cold place. He carefully covered me with a quilt and kissed me on the lips. Wait for me, stepmother. I will come to you after I kill them all. The longer Shen Sui slept, the longer his mother-in-law and housekeeper Li knelt. When she saw Shen Sui again, the mother-in-law had lost her arrogance and shrank back, not daring to say a word. Shen Sui had a smile on his face, but his whole body exuded a frightening and ruthless aura. Butler Lee, I promise to spare your life. Not only will I not break my promise, I will also reward you with a beautiful concubine. Butler Lee was overjoyed. Thank you, young master, for not killing me. The mother-in-law was so angry that she rushed over to bite Li Guanjia. You ungrateful dog. You tricked me into giving myself to you. I even gave birth to your child, and you actually abandoned me. With his only remaining hand, Li slapped his mother-in-law mercilessly. You damned bitch. I've had enough of you, a bitch. Shen Sui quietly watched them fighting each other with a mocking smile on his face. Butler Lee, I know you have some tricks to play with women. I've given her to you, and I want you to treat this vicious woman well. Don't worry, master. In the evening, Yang Ruyue was brought into the mansion. She wore a bright red wedding dress and timidly waited for her lover to come to the bridal chamber. Unfortunately, the person who came in and lifted her veil was a disgusting old man with a broken arm. I stood outside the door with Shen Sui, listening to the shrill screams and desperate cries from inside the room. Shen Sui looked in my direction and said softly, It's too filthy. Let's go, stepmother. Let's not watch it. I was shocked. Can he see me? Looking closely, he was just looking through me, absent-mindedly, into the distance. He caressed the jade pendant tenderly in his hand.
12.
On the second day, Butler Lee brought Yang Ruyue, whose face was covered with fingerprints, to visit Shen Sui. As soon as Yang Ruyue saw Shen Sui, she fell to the ground and cried, Shen Lang, he raped me. You have to take care of me. Shen then kicked her away. I don't care about your status as a prostitute. I took you into the mansion as a concubine. But you seduced my housekeeper on the first night you came in, and she became your lover. He did not hide his contemptuous look. I heard that you were quite happy. SK, you accept any man who comes and likes him. Yang Ryue was misunderstood by the person she loved deeply and cried heartbrokenly. I didn't. Please listen to my explanation. Shen Sui sighed. In this case, you should calm down and follow him steadily. Yang Ryue shook her head desperately. I don't want it. No. Butler Lee grabbed her neck and dragged her away. For a woman, the pain of the person she deeply loves despises and misunderstands her and gives her to someone else is unbearable. Yang Ryue's obsession is to marry Shen Sui despite her superior status. But now she is no longer a rich lady. Not only has she lost her innocence, but she also has to commit herself to a disabled and ugly man. She could see Shen Sui, the man she had been thinking about all the time, every day, but she could never touch him again. And her ugly and lustful appearance was seen by the man she loved deeply. Shen Sui just wanted to make her live a life worse than death. My mother-in-law and her 2 children were locked up in a dark room and were fed only rotten food that not even dogs would eat. The mother-in-law also saw that the new concubine of housekeeper Lee was Yang Ryue, and she was so angry that she wanted to rush up and tear her to pieces. You bitch. You shameless slut. You hook up with any man.
And you hooked me.
You're a bitch. She swore all day long and was very noisy. Shen Sui simply pulled out her tongue and poisoned her to make her mute. Then they found a dozen beggars and raped her in front of her children every day. The mother-in-law finally calmed down completely. After that, Shen Sui did not take any more action. This revenge seems to have come to an end. Shen Sui found some pill from somewhere to prevent corpses from rotting and put it into my mouth. He sleeps with me every day as usual, hugs me and talks to me. He released the maid Xiaotao to take care of my body. Xiaotao was scared and guilty, and she helped me wipe my body while trembling. When she rubbed my lower abdomen, she finally couldn't hold back her tears. Ma'am, don't blame me. I was really scared. I couldn't save you, nor could I save the baby in your belly. I'm so useless. I felt bad. She was still young, and it was good enough that she could protect herself. I didn't blame her. What did you say? Shen Sui suddenly appeared behind her, his face pale. Xiaotao collapsed to the ground in fear. 13. She's pregnant. Shen Sui stared at Xiaotao in disbelief. Did I hear it wrong? Xiaotao cried and shook her head. Madam had asked a doctor to check her pulse before, and she was pregnant for less than a month. Shen Sui closed his eyes in pain. His voice was hoarse. Why didn't she say it? Madam wanted to tell you, but before she could say it, you quarreled with her and gave her the divorce papers. She cried for a long time. Finally, she burned the divorce papers. Every word was like a sharp needle piercing Shen Sui's heart, making him unable to breathe due to the pain. Tears rolled down from his eyes, one after another, soaking his clothes. He curled his lips and smiled miserably. In the end, I am the one who deserves to die the most. Xiaotao. Shen Sui pulled out the sharp knife and walked towards her step by step. You feel sorry for her, but it's useless to say it. I will send you to accompany her now. No. Xiaotao and I shouted at the same time. Shen Sui pretended not to hear anything and coldly and quickly inserted the tip of the knife into Xiaotao's heart and cut into it a few more times as if he was not satisfied. Xiaotao fell in a pool of blood, twitching. Shen Sui, are you crazy? I couldn't believe that he even killed Xiaotao. You know she's innocent. Even if she comes to save me, she'll die with me. He couldn't hear a word of my feeble accusations. Shen Sui was like a walking corpse and went to find his mother-in-law with a knife in hand. The mother-in-law had been tortured beyond recognition, emaciated and dilapidated, and was now fighting for food with her 2 children. The 3 of them were like stray dogs on the roadside, fighting for the rotten rice in the bowl. Shen Sui pushed the door open, pulled his sister over expressionlessly, and slashed her neck fiercely with the tip of the knife. Blood spurted out with a puff. She covered her neck in horror, but couldn't stop the blood from flowing. She didn't even have time to scream before the person was gone. "Stop it. Don't make any more mistakes." I stood in front of him and tried my best to stop him. Shen Sui walked past me, pulled my brother over and pressed him to the ground, stabbing him again and again. The younger brother screamed miserably, "Mom, save me." The mother-in-law's pupils widened and she roared tremblingly, but no sound came out. At this moment, Shen Sui looked like a devil from hell, with blood all over his body and face. There was no emotion in his empty eyes. He numbly stabbed his half-brother, whom he once loved and cared for, as if there was only a pool of rotten meat in front of him. My brother had already passed away, and his face was stabbed to pieces. It was a horrible sight. Suddenly, he glared at his mother-in-law and asked, "How does it feel to watch your child being killed?" "My child was killed, too. You did it. Do you know? My stepmother is pregnant with my child. But what if you knew? You still wouldn't let her go." My mother-in-law huddled in a corner, trembling as if she had seen a ghost. "Don't worry, you'll be next. I wanted to kill you on the 49th day. But now I can't wait any longer." 14. Suddenly, there was a sound of a plate falling outside the door. Shen Sui turned his head and looked over. His eyes were as sharp as a torch. Yang Ryue screamed and ran away in fright. However, he had only run a few steps when Shen Sui grabbed his neck, dragged him back, and threw him to the ground. No matter how slow-witted Yang Ryue was, she understood that her tragic experience was nothing but Shen Sui's revenge. Sooner or later, she would have to pay for his beloved wife's life. Just like that, she was frightened into incontinence. "Don't kill me. Don't kill me." He pursed his lips slightly, and his aura was gloomy and terrifying. "You go and call Butler Lee." Yang Ryue went out trembling to call for help. Shen Sui found an axe from the woodshed. The axe tip rubbed against the wall, making a harsh sound, like a death warrant from the underworld. I didn't dare to watch any further, and hid outside the room away from Shen Sui. All I could hear was the mother-in-law making a ho-ho sound with difficulty from her throat, and then she was silent. The sound of chopping bones and cutting meat hit my heart again and again. I didn't know that he loved me so deeply that he was willing to kill my entire family, sacrifice his future, and make those who hurt me pay a heavy price. He shouldn't be like this. Where did that man with bright moon and fresh breeze go? My heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, and the piercing pain spread throughout my entire body. The massacre in the room finally stopped. At this time, Butler Lee also came. The smell of blood in his face made him stop immediately, but it was too late. I saw Shen Sui cleanly chop off his 3 remaining limbs, leaving only his head and body. Butler Lee was twitching and howling like a ghost. Shen Sui panted and shouted, "Wang Quan! Wang Quan!" Wang Quan ran over in a panic, but his legs went weak when he saw the scene in front of him, and he resisted the urge to vomit. "My lord, throw Steward Lee into the rice jar. Throw the rest to the dogs. And the one in my room, throw him to the mass grave." Yes. Yang Ryue stood far away outside the room and dared not make a sound. Shen Sui walked in front of her as if he had rolled through water of blood. "I have killed your father and brother. Just be obedient, and I will not kill you. Understand? I'll obey you. I'll obey you." Shen Sui was satisfied. "From now on, Steward Lee will be in your care. Move him to the ancestral hall. I don't care how you treat him, just make sure he doesn't die." Yang Ryue nodded desperately. "I understand." 15. Shen Sui exhaled a breath, looked up at the starry sky, tears rolling down his eyes. "Wan Yang." There was endless longing in her words. I gently stroked his face and shed silent tears. The next day, Shen Sui resigned from his post. He made great contributions to the purge this time. Although the emperor did not like him, he still rewarded him. But no matter how the Dali temple minister persuaded him, he was determined to resign. I don't know what his future plans are. No one outside knows that he killed his entire family. Shen Sui, went to the famous mountains on the outskirts of the city and found a feng shui treasure land for me. After he had arranged everything, he dismissed his slaves and gave all his savings to Wang Quan. Now, the only people left in the mansion are the half-dead housekeeper Li and the half-crazy and half-stupid Yang Ryue. I never even noticed that Shen Sui's hair had turned half-white. He stayed in the room with me all day long and never saw the light of day. It was not until the 49th day after my death that he finally buried me with his own hands and carved the tombstone. He stroked the tombstone with reluctance, then took out a dagger from his arms and stabbed it into his thigh without hesitation. This knife is to punish me for not caring enough about you and letting you be bullied by your mother-in-law without paying any attention to me. Then he stabbed you again. This knife is to punish me for being cowardly and incompetent and for being unable to do anything when you were bullied by outsiders. This knife is to punish me for hiding my plan to deal with the powerful from you and for breaking up with you without a care, which hurt your heart. This knife is my punishment for not being able to protect you and the child. The knife cut him again and again, and the blood kept flowing, but he seemed to be unconscious and didn't even frown. Shen Sui, don't be like this, I don't blame you. I had already stopped crying. He slowly put the dagger against his neck, tears welling up in his eyes. Mother, this is all my fault. I am sorry for you. If I hadn't fallen in love with you and conspired to take away your innocence, forcing you to marry me, how could you have lost your life because of my misfortune? See, I'm not a good person. You know what? I wasn't drugged that night. I lied to you. I thought you were innocent and easy to deceive, and I could trick you into becoming my wife. How could I have known that I would cause you to get pregnant and cause you to have an abortion and hurt your body? I got you, but I couldn't protect you. I should have never provoked you in the first place. I dare not ask for your forgiveness. I only ask that I can meet you again in the next life and make amends to you. The tip of the knife instantly sank into the neck, and blood gushed out. Shen Sui slowly closed his eyes in regret, fell in front of the tomb, and died. I burst into tears. No, Shen Sui, I don't blame you. Unfortunately, he didn't respond again. I stayed by his body for a whole day and night, but his spirit never came to see me. My heart sank little by little. Did he go to hell? Suddenly, Shen Sui's body moved. Then he slowly climbed up. He is not dead. How is this possible? Shen Sui looked at the branches swaying in the breeze in the distance and touched the fatal wound on his neck. He opened his eyes wide in disbelief. I'm still alive. He found the dagger and immediately stabbed it into his heart. Fearing that he would not die, he pulled it out and stabbed it again several times. However, this time no blood was shed, because the blood had already been drained. He laughed at himself and said, I am indeed a monster, a bug that can never die.
16.
Shen Sui tried many methods but failed. He went to Wan'an Temple to seek liberation from the abbot. When the abbot saw the murderous look on his face, he understood. All the evil deeds you have committed in the past are caused by greed, anger, and ignorance from the beginningless time, and are born from your body, speech, and mind. You should repent for all of them now. You have committed serious sins. This may be God's punishment for you. You will be sent to hell to suffer endlessly. Besides, your obsession is so deep that it will hurt the people you love. After the abbot said this, he glanced at me beside Shen Sui meaningfully. I never thought that there was anyone in this world who could see me. I took a step back in fear. Shen Sui's expression changed. What do you mean, abbot? What are you looking at? The abbot smiled and said, She has not yet been able to enter the reincarnation cycle because of your obsession. Say goodbye to her properly. Let her go, and let yourself go. Shen Sui asked in a hoarse voice, Where is she? I never left you. His eyes suddenly turned red. At night, he personally folded many gold ingots and came to my grave, burning them for me bit by bit. I squatted beside him, turned my head, and met his gaze.
Can he see me?
I have no idea. His eyes sometimes focused on my face and sometimes drifted away into the distance. Mother, you have seen my ugly and crazy appearance, right? Yeah, it's a little scary. You hate me? How could that be? Do you still love me? Love. I understand. Go ahead, or you'll be late for reincarnation. May my stepmother be safe and prosperous in her next life. He threw all the gold ingots into the brazier. My soul slowly dissipated, and a tear fell, clearly hitting Shen Sui's palm. He tightened his grip and finally smiled. 17. My name is Shen Nianwan. I am the only legitimate daughter of the Wuan Marquis family and the apple of his eye. At the age of 16, having been brought up in care, I have reached the age to get married. I heard that the Xinyuan temple on the outskirts of the city was very effective in finding love, so my mother took me and my maid Xiaotao to worship the Buddha. My mother always says that I am too quiet and mature. I just smiled. She doesn't know that I carry the memories of my past life. More than 100 years have passed since Sangwan passed away in the previous life. The world has changed over time. Dynasties have come and gone. Everything in my past life seems like a passing cloud, quietly drifting away from me. Worshipping Buddha is really too boring. I hid from my mother and secretly went to the back mountain to wander around, but accidentally got lost. It was getting dark and there were many wild animals in the mountains. I couldn't help but feel scared. Fortunately, there was a monk collecting herbs not far away, walking slowly with a cane. I chased after him and said, "Master, I am lost in the mountains. Can you help me find the way?" Hearing the voice, he slowly turned around and asked, "Do you want to go back to Xinyuan Temple?" His face was hidden by the brim of his hat, and he was wearing a very ordinary gray shirt. Therefore, the jade pendant hanging on his chest and swaying gently was extremely eye-catching. Donor. I walked up to him blankly, my fingertips trembling, and lifted his hat. He frowned and grabbed my wrist with great dissatisfaction. "Please respect yourself, benefactor." A stinging sadness rose in my throat. I choked up and said, "Shen Sui. Did he live alone for 100 years? Shen Sui froze suddenly, and his palms tightened unconsciously. "Who are you?" He stared at me intently, but unfortunately, he couldn't see anything. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of white mist. "Someone is calling behind me." "Where are you, mother-in-law?" "Mother-in-law." Shen Sui's throat tightened, and his voice became very hoarse. "Yes, stepmother?"